And as I already said, Latvia is now the newest member of the euro. Latvia that, by the way, went through one of the most demanding programs of adjustment and now has one of the highest growth levels. I mention these countries because these were the countries that had somehow a program, either a full program or a partial program, like in the case of Spain. But I could mention others that are also engaging in a process of reforms, even if they did not, I hope they will never need a program. The case in mind is Italy. Tomorrow I will receive Prime Minister Letta and his government here in Brussels precisely, and we'll certainly speak about these matters. And if you look at these countries I just mentioned, what was the secret of their success, to part at least, was industry. Because they were able, during the crisis, while the demand was going down internally, they were able to go out and build on the growth of external demand. And in fact, it's amazing to see the evolution, for instance, of the external trade balance and the balance of payments of Ireland, Spain, Portugal, and Greece. It's amazing. It was Greece. It was in Greece, it was in Portugal, it was in Ireland and Spain that you have seen that our industries were able to find new markets with a great adaptation, with great resilience, sometimes small, medium-sized companies that were able to go out from China to Brazil, from Africa to the United States. So this shows, indeed, your point, that industry matters, and that industry is extremely important for the rebirth or the renaissance of our economy. But of course, it's not enough. We need also to put in place the necessary reforms to complement the monetary union and the fully functioning economic union. That's why we need to complete the banking union with the adoption of the single resolution mechanism. And I'm urging Council, Member States, and Parliament to finalize the legislation before the European Parliament elections, because it will not simply be credible after announcing that we have completed the banking union, that now we don't have one of the pillars of this banking union, the single resolution mechanism, in place. It's also important to reinforce our economic governance. This is why the European semester, now in its second year, is important to ensure that member states have sustainable economic policies and budgets, and also that they can restore confidence of the markets through the proper implementation of the Stability and Growth Pact. Only by doing this will there be business confidence to invest, to innovate, to produce, consumer confidence to spend. Only this way can we get sustainable jobs and growth. Of course, our recovery needs to happen in all sectors and across Europe. We have today a very uneven situation in Europe. I know also how much the European industry has suffered during the crisis with a lack of demand, a lack of investment and financing conditions, and an increasing energy costs. Unemployment has reached an intolerable level in Europe. This is one of the reasons why we are taking action with Youth Employment Initiative and Youth Guarantee that the European Commission has proposed, for which we have decided to front-load 6 billion euros from the structural funds over the period 2014-2015. To create jobs in Europe is therefore our #1 priority. We know some of the conditions are related to macro transformations, but we believe it is important, specifically for the youth unemployment, to have now some targeted voluntaristic action. And now the matter is, in terms of the important issue, is about implementation. So that all goes to the heart of what we have called our Europe 2020 agenda for smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. And just as we have learned the lessons from the crisis, we should now implement those lessons in terms of shaping and directing our economies and societies. This 10-year strategy that we have adopted in 2010 is still valid, with its concrete targets on employment level, percentage of GDP on research and innovation, youth mobility, education standards and skills. social inclusion, poverty reduction, energy efficiency, and others. Within this strategy, Europe's industry does indeed matter. Europe's industry has been a great source of prosperity for Europe, and if you want to remain prosper in the future, we need to keep and to reinforce our full attention to industry. As you have said, Madam President, over 80% of Europe's exports are from industry. 75% of trade within the single market is industry. 80% of private research and innovation goes into industry. And in total, 1 in 4 private sector jobs are in an industry. And we'll know, of course, what also is the impact of a job created in industry for the services sector. It also needs attention in industry because we need a balanced economy. Recent events have shown us that over-reliance on one sector of our economy makes us more vulnerable to shocks. And success in manufacturing spills over into the service industry. This is why we have called for a return to 20% of industry's share in Europe's GDP by 2020, a figure we already had in the 90s before the housing and financial bubbles. The current figure of 15.1% is clearly below our goals. And this is why we have called for European industrial renaissance, supported by a strong and well-functioning single market, and an improved business environment, a renewed energy and climate policy, and, on the external dimension, an ambitious trade policy. We need, indeed, a single industrial market working together as one, and not separately as 28. Our industry, our SMEs, need the full implementation of our single market across the board. From what we already have agreed and need fully in place, such as the Service Directive and Single European Sky, to new proposals, such as the Forced Railway Package, telecoms, roaming charges, and a digital single market. Sometimes people speak about us and the United States, some of the gaps in competitiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the most important points. In the United States, they have a single market. They have an integrated single market. In Europe, we have a single market for goods that is functioning, but we have not yet, indeed, in practice, a single market for services. We don't have yet a single market for energy. We don't have yet a single market for digital. And this is one of the key difficulties we have in our competitiveness gap with our American partners. Because, in fact, our companies don't have the same access to an integrated market as they have. This is why we need to complete the work that was already broadly agreed. But, in fact, we have to be honest, there are some delays in implementation. Yes. And we also need, of course, the right level of regulation. I will not now elaborate on that. And precisely because I was asked to be more brief. And we need, of course, to leverage the funds we have from the structural funds for competitiveness. We are doing that. In fact, according to our estimates, by the end of 2013, our competitiveness and innovation program has assisted financial institutions in providing about 30 billion euros of new finance for over 315,000 SMEs and has created or maintained about 380,000 jobs. And this is why we have to go ahead with this program. But before I conclude, let me say some words on climate and energy, because I've understood this is one of the matters of concern for you. I'm sure you all agree that climate change is a basic and very important threat to our planet, and that we have to do something ourselves and the others to safeguard the quality of life in our planet. I believe industry and climate action are not incompatible. In fact, if you look historically, since 1990 until the end of 2012, we were able in Europe to reduce emissions by 18%, while the GDP has grown in that same period by 45%. This is important to mention because some of our partners, namely emerging economies, think or tend to think that it is impossible to achieve the high levels of growth they are expecting with some commitments, binding commitments in terms of climate change. It's true that some adaptations have to be taken, but it's not true that by definition a climate policy is against industrial competitiveness. Some of the countries that in fact are more developed in Europe and in the world have been extremely ambitious in terms of their targets, by the way, in the environmental policy and climate change. That's why last week the European Commission has announced for 2030 an ambitious but realistic 40% target to reduce emissions and at least 27% renewable target at European level. So we have, in fact, while keeping the ambition, given much more flexibility to the member states to achieve it, also to the market. We believe this is much more sensible than now continuing to focus on very, very constrained targets at national level, because, in fact, we are in a new moment of the implementation, for instance, of renewables policy. At the same time, we have respected the energy mix of our member states. That's why we did not have directly regulation on shale gas.
Sorry, we're going to have to get really short because we have the Parliament President and the Prime Minister arriving soon. I'm sorry.
So, my last point is that for that we need to have, of course, the mobilization also of others. That's why at last week we were able to conclude, to call, together with Ban Ki-moon in Davos, the attention of all the other partners, because I agree, we can only succeed on climate policy if you are able to mobilize our partners globally to meet those targets as well. So, to conclude, following the instructions from the moderator, I want to say that I'm fully confident that in this new phase of our economy, we'll be able, together with the member states, to get out of this crisis stronger, including through increased competitiveness in the industry. For that, your recommendations that I will certainly read, but I've heard are very much in line with our preoccupations, are certainly in the right direction. Now the real key issue is implementation. This is the point. Basically, all the analyses converge in innovation, in skills, in competitiveness, in internal market, all basically converge. What we need now, and for that we need to keep your role with European institutions and with the national governments, is to focus on delivery, on implementation, so that we can have a stronger industry for a stronger Europe. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. And apologies, we could have listened to you all day, but packed agenda, so much to get through.